Think about how much of your daily thinking you've already outsourced to algorithms. From firing off quick emails to generating blocks of code, it's a lot, right? Well, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating piece of research by Sudhakar Kota from the Department of Cognitive Science and Human-Computer Interaction, published back in June 2026. The paper is called The Cognitive Confluence, a vector-based framework for human-AI coevolution. And we're not just talking about adopting some new software here. No, we're exploring how our own behavior fundamentally dictates the trajectory of human intellect itself as we live alongside artificial intelligence. It is a huge topic, so let's get into it.
To figure out how we can actually steer this technological intersection, we've got a clear roadmap. We'll look at the cognitive collision, map out the two vectors, explore three possible futures, untangle the creativity paradox, and finally, dive into the power of agency.
Starting right off with Section 1, the cognitive collision.
We're standing at this incredibly unique evolutionary juncture. And to really wrap our heads around it, we've got to completely reframe how we view generative AI. Kota puts it absolutely perfectly in the paper. He writes, rather than acting as a static tool, contemporary AI functions as an independent cognitive force. Think about that for a second. The crucial takeaway here is we have to move way past those simplistic automation models. In the past, we treated tech like a hammer, or maybe a calculator, just a static object sitting there waiting for our physical input. But the rapid explosion of generative models means we have to recognize this moment for what it really is. A dynamic collision of dual intelligence. It's an active, relentless force crashing right into another active force. Us.
Which brings us to Section 2, mapping the two vectors.
Let's isolate the distinct internal properties of these converging forces, just to see how they actually interact. When we map them out, we get two totally distinct, non-parallel vectors. First up, the vector of human cognition. Now, our velocity, it's naturally pretty low. We're slow, we're intrinsically imperfect, we get emotional, and sometimes we're just plain exhausted. But our primary capability is massive. We possess high semantic processing depth. Basically, we actually understand meaning. We bring structural intuition, lived experience, and nuanced judgment to the table. Then, colliding right into us, is the vector of artificial cognition. Its velocity is just exponentially expanding. It's utterly tireless, operating at near infinite speed. But, and this is absolutely critical, it completely lacks intrinsic semantic comprehension. It doesn't actually know a single thing. An AI doesn't feel the emotional weight of a sad story or grasp the elegance of a math proof like we do. It's just matching patterns with deterministic algorithmic precision. So you've got one force that's slow but gets deep meaning, colliding with a force that's infinitely fast but only understands patterns.
So, what happens when they hit? That's Section 3, three possible futures. When these two vastly different vectors intersect, Kota argues that the resulting socio-technical equilibrium has to resolve into one of three distinct behavioral states. In the first state, symbiosis, or what he calls structural coalescence, the vectors find balance through functional compartmentalization. Imagine a unified cognitive network where you and the machine play completely different complementary roles. Your capabilities are vastly expanded here. It's like, think of being the conductor of a massive symphony. You aren't up there playing every single instrument yourself, right? But you're the structural orchestrator determining the final sound. You provide the judgment, the meaning, the overarching direction. Meanwhile, you outsource all that heavy lifting, the cognitive volume, the data retrieval, the sheer speed, straight to the machine. You stay firmly in the driver's seat with intentional oversight, but your reach, it's completely supercharged.
But what if we drop the ball? If the sheer velocity of AI outpaces our human capacity to integrate it, we crash into state 2, displacement, or systemic repulsion. Because the machine is just so incredibly fast and capable, we start to rely on it entirely. And that triggers systemic cognitive offloading. Think about it like this. If you rely 100% on GPS for a decade, your innate sense of direction is going to totally vanish, right? Constantly relying on AI to do the thinking for us causes the progressive atrophy of our own creative and critical faculties. It's the path of least resistance. We stop being the active originators of ideas, and over time, we just become passive consumers of synthesized outputs. It's a profound intellectual regression.
Then there's the third possibility, a transformation known as epistemic hybridization. Honestly, this is probably the most profound and complex outcome. Here, a totally novel, distributed cognitive architecture emerges. The very boundaries between what a human intends and what a machine executes, they just begin to dissolve completely. So, what does a distributed human-AI hybrid identity actually look like in the real world? It means the traditional barrier between having an idea and the execution of that idea blends so seamlessly you literally can't untangle the two anymore. As you formulate a thought, the machine is instantly reacting, prompting, and executing, which then instantly reshapes your next thought. Knowledge production becomes highly dynamic and deeply co-creative. Instead of you just giving a computer step-by-step commands, your decision-making shifts into an ongoing, fluid orchestration. You and the AI become a single, unified cognitive entity, solving problems together in real time.
Now let's look at Section 4, the creativity paradox.
Understanding those potential futures leads us straight into a very real, very palpable fear floating around in tech critiques today. We hear this question all the time, right? Is artificial intelligence actively stealing human creativity? A lot of people are terrified that machines are somehow extracting our creative spark, invalidating the very traits that make us human. But Coda's paper pushes back hard on this sort of technological determinism. Instead, it proposes a radically different behavioral hypothesis.
Here is the ultimate paradox. We aren't actually losing our innate neurological capacity to create. Not at all. It all comes down to what the paper calls the cognitive demand hypothesis. It operates exactly like market-driven supply and demand. The decline in human creative and analytical output isn't because some big bad AI came along and stole it directly out of your brain. It is literally just an environmental adaptation. The socio-technical environment we're building around ourselves right now, it simply doesn't mandate our manual cognitive processing as much anymore. As systemic cognitive demand drops, our neurological and cultural supply naturally follows suit. We just stop exercising those specific mental muscles because, well, our environment no longer strictly requires it for us to survive or succeed. It makes perfect sense when you look at it that way.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, the power of agency.
This brings us to the single most empowering takeaway of this entire framework. Because this is an environmental adaptation, the ultimate outcome of this confluence is fundamentally non-deterministic. Basically, it's not set in stone. Ultimately, your behavioral variables act as the steering wheel here. If you choose a path of passivity, engaging with uncritical acceptance and just totally offloading your cognitive work, the systemic trajectory naturally slides toward vector repulsion, and that inevitably leads to displacement, the literal automated replacement of your intellectual labor. You basically make yourself obsolete by your own hand. But if you engage through intentional tool deployment, rigorous dialectical interrogation, and structured collaboration, you shift that trajectory entirely. You move toward vector fusion. That leads to amplification, the dramatic optimization and expansion of your human cognitive capacity. You don't get replaced, you get seriously leveled up.
So that brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with today. Since human agency alone dictates our trajectory toward either intellectual atrophy or cognitive amplification, the choice of how you engage with these systems is 100% yours. We are observing a massive, foundational structural shift in human intellectual evolution. Will you choose to just sit back, be a passive consumer of automated outputs, and let your cognitive muscles atrophy? Or are you going to step up, intentionally collaborate, and become a structural orchestrator of our incredible new hybrid intelligence? The choice is absolutely yours. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning and keep orchestrating.